Well, thanks for coming today. The program's Talking Politics in Western Pennsylvania. I'm Bill Merrell, I'm your host. We're going to be doing a 10-part series looking at the Biden-Harris administration. And it's a critical look at what they've done in 3.5 or 3.75 years. And so I hope everybody understands and realizes whenever we're looking at these, most of these slides are from organizations that, well, they're from the media. Okay, let's just start off today. The PetroDollar. Okay, the PetroDollar is one of those things that most people don't know about. We're going to find out about it right now.
The simple definition of a petrodollar is the revenue from oil in mainly Middle Eastern countries, a revenue that is denominated in US dollars, not the currency of the countries where the oil comes from. All those nations that export their oil must sell it in dollars, so if the dollar loses value, so does their oil. But countries also peg their real currency to the dollar. That means fixing their currency with the dollar. So if the dollar fluctuates, so does their currency. If the dollar value lowers, so do the goods and services of that country. This ensures those countries don't experience wild swings in inflation or deflation. So what exactly is the relation between petrodollars and real dollars? Welcome to this episode of the Infographic Show, How Petrodollars Affect the US Dollar. We're told that the beginnings of this petrodollar system was in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. This conference was one of the big events of the 20th century because it's when it was agreed that the new global currency would be the US dollar. America would be the only country that could print this currency. This is when we saw the formation of both the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. As always, the website The Balance gives a very detailed account of what this would mean. The Balance explains if a country's currency value became too weak relative to the dollar, the bank would buy up its currency in foreign exchange markets. That would lower the currency's supply and raise its price. If the currency became too high, the bank would print more. That would increase the supply and lower its price. 43 countries signed up in an effort to rebuild the world after a devastating world war and to cooperate better with each other in terms of trade. The Bretton Woods website tells us it was felt by the leaders of the Allied countries, particularly the US and Britain, that a multilateral framework was needed to overcome the destabilizing effects of the previous global economic depression and trade battles. It ended anyway in 1971, when the US suffered what is called stagflation, and that means a combination of inflation and recession. This had a negative effect on nations that belong to what is called the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Most of the member countries are in the Middle East, with others being in Central America and Africa. Then in 1979, we got something called the US-Saudi Arabian Joint Commission on Economic Cooperation. In that agreement, Saudi Arabia agreed to use American dollars for their oil transactions. These dollars would get back into America through contractors, and so they were what are called recycled petrodollars. This deal with Saudi Arabia was the start of this petrodollar. Was this good for the US? Investopedia tells us the petrodollar system elevated the US dollar to the world's reserve currency, and through this status, the United States enjoys persistent trade deficits and is a global economic hegemony. We all know that in the world, the most in-demand resource is oil. It makes oil-rich countries very wealthy, and it's priced in dollars that makes the USA's currency the most dominant currency in the world. Some say this gives the USA something called exorbitant privilege, which means, according to Investopedia, the USA can perpetually finance its current account deficit by issuing dollar-denominated assets at very low rates of interest, as well as becoming a global economic hegemony. The USA can just print its own money, which is nice for the USA, as it can pay off its massive debt with that money. Imagine you were broke, but could just borrow and then just go to the money tree in the garden to pay off the debt. There are many critics of this system, with one economist writing, "The amount of debt, leverage, deceit, corruption, and fraud in the economic markets, financial system, and in the energy industry are off the charts." Another bonus for the USA is that it can just buy its oil with its own products, which might mean massive construction contracts, expensive military planes, or technologically advanced tanks. Saying that, as we write this, Bloomberg is saying the dollar as reserve currency might be coming to an end, and the days of exorbitant privilege are fast running out. Why is that? We'll let Bloomberg explain. With the current U.S. administration policies of unilateralism, trade wars, and sanctions increasingly affecting both friends and foes, the question arises whether the rest of the world should diversify away from the risks of the U.S. dollar and dollar-centric finance. In 2017, Reuters told us that the power of the petrodollar was already waning. Back in the day, when the USA was busy spending big on oil and petrodollars were going into oil-rich nations and being recycled back out, all was good. But these days, according to that report, not as much of the money is coming back out. These countries are shoring up finances and safeguarding stability at home, said Reuters. Where all the oil money goes, said that report, is hard to say. But a good chunk of it ends up in offshore financial centers, such as the UK, the Cayman Islands, Ireland, Switzerland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Reuters isn't alone. Another journalist wrote this: the United States' ability to maintain its influence over the rest of the world has been slowly diminishing. The USA's dollar monopoly, we are told, might be coming to an end. One of the reasons is that mass consumers of oil, China as well as Russia, have been setting up deals with oil-rich countries, and nope, they are not doing these deals in the US dollar. The article says as the tide continues to turn against the petrodollar, eventually even our allies will start to question what best serves their own interests. Forbes writes that there will likely be something called the petro-yuan, but that doesn't mean that the yuan will become the reserve global currency. Forbes tells us that everyone has it wrong and that the USA doesn't enjoy a huge advantage because oil is sold in dollars. The US economy is the central economy in the global system because it's the most open, innovative, and productive economy in the world. And because of this, the US dollar is the most convenient, liquid, and reliable medium of exchange, said the article. Can that be challenged? Not yet, according to the story, solely because no other currency can match that. China also has massive reserves of US dollars, which might seem like the country has its hopes on the dollar remaining strong. Although some critics say China is writing off the dollar and, along with Russia, is buying lots of gold. These critics tell us that those countries believe the dollar is about to inflate. There are likely more doomsday believers than there are positive views, as we saw in the Forbes piece. Headlines like this are all over the media. End of petrodollar hedge money may happen soon, and badly impact indebted America. That particular article tells us America has been playing hardball with too many countries, and a growing number of countries seek to end the dollar hedge money.
Okay, that basically gave you the history of the petrodollar, what happened in 1940s, and the agreement after World War II that in fact brought the petrodollar into play. Okay, and it was solidified by Richard Nixon at the end of the 60s in the beginning of the 70s. His national security advisor, as you see by the slide here, Henry Kissinger, and William Simon worked on a program with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to in fact price all of its oil in US dollars. Okay, King Faisal agreed to that, and to in fact solidify it, the US military would protect Saudi Arabia. Now, when I was in the military, I was a superintendent of chemical, nuclear, and biological warfare. And whenever I was activated during Desert Storm to in fact go to the military district of Washington, I found out from Congressman Bill Gray that in fact the real reason that the U.S. went to the Gulf War to protect Saudi Arabia was in fact this agreement. It really didn't have anything to do with weapons of mass destruction at that point. Okay, this agreement, and it's interesting to understand that this agreement turned out to be the most influential agreement of the century financially for the world. Okay, so it wasn't just the U.S. benefits, it was for the entire world. Once again, understanding the petrodollar, what happened, we worked out an agreement with Saudi Arabia, but in 2016, all the other countries fell in line and priced their oil on U.S. dollars, which made it real beneficial for the U.S. because every country had to come and buy our dollars. So they bought them through gold, they bought them by buying our debt, and we gave them money. Well, that was great for us, but it really sort of just their dollars or their monetary systems didn't work out well for them because everything was now pegged to the U.S. dollar. Today, 90% of all foreign exchanges are still made with U.S. dollars. 60% of the foreign exchange reserves are in U.S. dollar, and global debt, 40%, is in U.S. dollars. U.S. cutting Russia's central bank from the U.S. transactions was a terrible move for the U.S. I understand Biden tried to take the high road on this, and in fact, it was one of those things he probably should have looked the other way, because it didn't do anything, as we'll see here. It didn't do anything to the Russian economy. All it did was, in fact, take the money that Russia had in their bank accounts and, in fact, kept it so they couldn't use it. And once again, it sounded good because they attacked Ukraine, but it wasn't good for us, based on the idea that what they did was basically stole their money, not allowing them to have it. That caused a real issue, because we'll see here in a second. Kremlin says it has a list of Western assets that is going to be confiscated. Based on the one action, there was a reaction. And once again, as you see there in the yellow, it will be a significant blow to the main parameters of the international economy. It will undermine the international economy. It will undermine the confidence of other countries in the U.S. as well as the EU as economic grantors. Therefore, such actions are fraught with very, very serious consequences. Okay, this, like I said, it sounds like it was a real, we're going to stick up for the Ukraine, and in fact support them in every way possible. But whenever reality struck, it's going to come back to haunt us in the future, and it's going to make a damaging effect on our economy. As you see down there at the bottom, Putin made the comment that anyone could be next in line for the appropriations of the U.S. and the West. All right, and that's a very important thing, because that is now pushing the organizations which we call the BRICS into their camp, because everyone's concerned now that anytime the U.S. doesn't feel appreciated or doesn't want these countries to do what they want, they're going to hold their money. And we'll see in a little slide here in a minute how devastating that is for us. The death of the petrodollar is a Biden legacy, okay? And this was written by the European Union. It wasn't by anybody around here. Candidate Joe Biden announced that if he was elected, he would determine to make the Saudi rulers pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. Okay, very little social redeeming value in the president government in Saudi Arabia under King Salomon's rule. Now, this was all done because of Khashoggi's decapitation by the royal family, okay, which was found out that he was an FBI plant, or CIA plant, one of them. And anyhow, it was a case where, once again, Biden tried to take the high road, but his high road is not going to be beneficial to us, the United States. In June, the end of the petrodollar is the end of the Americans' global dominance. And this is what's really sad when you look at it this way, all right? Our debt stands at 35 plus trillion. 9 trillion of that, actually it's almost 10 trillion now, was added during the Biden administration. Once again, remember, Biden called the Saudi prince, bin Salman, a pariah. And we all remember seeing the picture of Biden went groveling, literally, and this is the words of the Federalist, not me, went groveling to Saudi Arabia, fist-bumping and unsmiling Prince Salman, asked the kingdom to increase oil production, and he refused. The U.S.-Saudi petrodollar pact ends after 50 years. And this is, like I said, this will be a devastating, and this is, once again, this is from the NASDAQ, it's not from me. If oil were to be priced in a currency other than the dollar, it could lead to a decline in global demand for the greenback. This, in turn, could result in higher inflation, higher interest rates, and a weaker bond market in the United States. The expiration of the PetroDollar agreement represents a significant shift in global power dynamics. It highlights the growing influence of emerging economies and changing energy landscape. While the full implication of this shift remains to be seen, investors should at least be aware that on a macro level, the global financial order is entering into a new era. The U.S. dollar dominance is no longer guaranteed. And what happens when the dollar collapses? The cost of imports will become more expensive. The government will not be able to borrow at current rates, resulting in a deficit that will need to be filled by increasing taxes or printing money, which causes more inflation. Inflation will skyrocket due to the higher cost and imports of printing money, result in an overall collapse of the economy. We saw this happen in South American countries like Venezuela. BRICS, the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Okay, once again, this, sorry to say that economist Jim O'Neill was representing an American company whenever he came up with the idea of the BRICS, with the belief that these economies would dominate global growth into the 2050s. The BRICS nations offered a source of foreign expansion for firms and strong returns for institutional investors. The map you see there are all the countries that formed the BRICS, or some of the countries that are asking to be a part of the BRICS. This is interesting because right now, as you see, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, the countries that we usually try to buy oil from, are going to be not using the American dollar anymore. What is the group and which countries have joined? Once again, there are 48 other countries at this moment looking to join the BRICS, which means that they go from a population, as you see down there in red, of about 45% of the world inhabitants to closer to 65% of the world inhabitants will be under the BRICS program. Combined member economies are worth more than 28 trillion, about 28% of the global economy at this time. The demise of U.S. power, de-dollarization, and the BRICS. The angry, and I will say angry, de-dollarization debate is prompted in part by the freezing of half of Russia's central bank gold and foreign exchange reserve. 2 years later, at a specific sitting on September 20th, 2024, the U.S. Congress passed a foreign aid package that would permit the Biden administration to confiscate $6 billion of Russian assets. Once again, Congress didn't have a clue what they're doing either. They didn't have a long-term idea, which demonstrated to the world that you, in fact, could be penalized if the United States decided you didn't go along with what they said. Now, stop and think about it for a minute. Biden has put up 6,000 sanctions against other countries, individuals, organizations, companies, while he's been in office for 3 3/4 years. 6,000, which is more than the last 3 or 4 presidents have put together. All right. These sanctions, he's used the power of the dollar. He's used the power of the waning power of the American to, in fact, do his bidding. The demise of the U.S. dollar, de-dollarization, and the BRICS Part 2. The majority world's angry response. Angry Chinese, Africa, and Latin American leaders responded quickly. If the United States concedes Russia's assets held in their trust at the Federal Reserve or the ECB, they ask what stops the U.S. from seizing the assets of other states they disapprove of. South Africa's president expressed concerns that global financial and payment systems are increasingly being used as instruments of geopolitical contestation. Now, here's the problem. How much debt do the current BRIC members have of the U.S.? As of a couple days ago, the U.S. debt was $35.36 trillion. Out of that, the countries China, Russia, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia own $28.68 trillion of our debt, which is keeping us afloat. Now, once again, Biden, Harris, and Congress had no clue about what they were doing long term. Russia economy was supposed to be crushed after we took the money. And this is from the BBC. The International Monetary Fund predicts that Russia will record economic growth of 3.2% this year. Caveats aside, that is still more than in any other world's advanced economy. So their growth had nothing to do with what happened with what these folks had in fact planned for the Russian economy. They wanted it to crush. They wanted the dollar to absolutely be the king, and their money, the ruble, would be garbage. Didn't work out that way. How petrodollars affect the U.S. dollar? Bottom line, the petrodollar system has been a crucial pillar of U.S. economy, and this is from Investopia, for almost a half a century, creating a symbolic relationship between the global oil trade and the value of the American dollar. This arrangement has ensured a constant demand for the U.S. currency and Treasury securities, allowing America to maintain lower interest rates and finance its debts. A decline of the petrodollar would have far-reaching consequences for the U.S. economy and the international financial order. Moreover, at the bottom there, it could accelerate the transition to a more multipolar global financial system, altering the balance of economic power and reshaping international trade relations. And here's just one thought for you. Did anyone else notice there wasn't a single American flag at the Democratic National Convention? Thanks for stopping by. We'll look forward to showing the next section 2, and we're going to be doing that right after this one. So we'll be seeing you very soon. And once again, this is part 1, the petrodollar. Part 2 will be coming up, talking about our military. Thank you very much.